Ethan Miller had learned early that the world did not slow down for anyone, especially not for people like him. At 36, he lived in a narrow apartment above a closed-down laundromat on the south side of Chicago, the kind of place where the paint peeled like old scabs and the heater rattled all winter without ever truly warming the room. Every morning, he woke before dawn, pulled on the same gray hoodie, and stepped into the cold with a single thought pressing on his chest like a weight: survive the day. He worked 2 jobs, one stocking shelves at a grocery store before sunrise and another delivering food until late at night. There was no time for dreams, no room for kindness. Kindness, he believed, was a luxury for people who could afford to lose time, money, or emotional energy. For Ethan, life had taught him one harsh lesson again and again: look out for yourself, because no one else will. His father had believed the same. A factory worker who lost his job when Ethan was 16, his father slowly dissolved into bitterness, drinking away whatever hope remained until the man Ethan once admired became someone he barely recognized. His mother worked herself sick trying to hold the family together, and when she died suddenly from a heart condition, Ethan felt something inside him shut down permanently. College dreams vanished. Trust vanished. Faith vanished. He told himself the world was transactional: give only when you expected something back, and never give more than you could afford to lose. That belief kept him moving, but it also hollowed him out. He passed people every day: homeless men curled up near subway vents, exhausted mothers juggling kids and groceries, elderly strangers struggling with doors, and he never stopped. Not because he hated them, but because stopping felt dangerous. Because stopping meant feeling. One bitter December evening, after a 14-hour day that left his feet aching and his patience razor-thin, Ethan stood at a red light near the elevated train station, waiting for the signal to change. Snow fell in wet, heavy flakes, coating the sidewalks in slush. His phone buzzed with a notification from his bank, another overdraft warning. He sighed, shoved the phone back into his pocket, and muttered a curse under his breath. That was when he heard it, a thin, trembling voice calling out from behind him. "Sir, excuse me, sir." Ethan stiffened. He didn't turn around at first. He already knew the script. Someone would ask for money, or food, or help, and he would have to say no, and that no would stick with him all night. But the voice persisted, fragile yet determined. Against his better judgment, he turned. The man standing there looked older than his years, wrapped in a worn coat that barely held together at the seams. His beard was untrimmed, his hands red and shaking from the cold. But his eyes were clear, almost painfully so. "I'm sorry to bother you," the man said, his voice cracking. I dropped my gloves somewhere. I can't feel my fingers. I don't need money. I just wondered if you maybe had an extra pair. Or if you knew somewhere warm I could go." Ethan felt irritation rise instinctively, sharp and fast. He didn't have gloves to spare. He didn't have time. He didn't have emotional bandwidth. He opened his mouth to say no, and then something unexpected happened. The man coughed, a deep, hollow sound that seemed to echo in Ethan's chest. And suddenly, Ethan saw his father, hunched in a chair years ago, hands shaking the same way, pride long gone but dignity still clinging by a thread. Before he could stop himself, Ethan shrugged off his backpack and reached inside. He pulled out a pair of thick wool gloves, his only pair, a gift from his mother years before she died. He had kept them carefully, repairing small holes, refusing to replace them even when they wore thin. His hand hesitated. Giving them away felt like tearing out the last physical piece of her he had left. But something heavier pressed on him now, something he couldn't ignore. He held the gloves out. "Here," he said, his voice gruffer than he intended. "Take these. There's a shelter 2 blocks east. They served soup around this time." The man stared at the gloves as if Ethan had handed him something sacred. Slowly, reverently, he accepted them. Tears welled up in his eyes. "You don't know what this means," he whispered. "Thank you. I hope life gives this back to you somehow. Ethan nodded awkwardly, already turning away, embarrassed by the sudden tightness in his throat. He didn't believe in karma. He didn't believe in cosmic balance. But as he walked away, something strange happened. For the first time in years, his chest felt lighter. Days passed, and then weeks. Life did not magically improve. Bills piled up. His delivery bike broke down. The grocery store cut his hours. Some nights, hunger gnawed at him because he chose to pay rent instead of buying food. More than once, he regretted giving away those gloves when his hands went numb in the cold. He told himself that kindness hadn't changed anything, that reality was still unforgiving. And yet, something inside him had shifted. He found himself noticing people more. Holding doors. Letting someone go ahead of him in line. Small things, almost unconscious, but they added up in quiet ways. One afternoon, while delivering food downtown, a customer tipped him $50 by mistake. When Ethan tried to return it, the man laughed and said, "Keep it. I remember what it's like to struggle." That night, Ethan ate a hot meal without guilt. Another time, a coworker overheard Ethan talking about his broken bike and offered to help fix it for free. "You helped me out once when my shift got covered," the coworker said. "Figured I'd return the favor." Ethan didn't even remember doing it. Then, one morning in early spring, everything changed. Ethan was restocking shelves when his manager called him into the back office. His stomach dropped. He had been expecting bad news, more hour cuts, maybe even termination. Instead, the manager cleared his throat and slid a paper across the desk. "Corporate's launching a new logistics program," he said. "They're promoting from within. One of our regional supervisors personally recommended you." Ethan stared at the paper, confused. "Recommended me? I barely talk to anyone." The manager shrugged. "Apparently, you helped someone downtown a few months back. Older guy. Homeless for a while. Turns out he used to be a supply chain director for a national retailer before he lost everything. He got back on his feet recently. He recognized your name on a delivery receipt and remembered you." Ethan's heart began to race. "Recognized me, from where?" The manager smiled faintly. "From the night you gave him your gloves." Ethan felt like the room tilted. The memory flooded back, clear eyes, shaking hands, quiet dignity. The man's words echoed in his mind, "I hope life gives this back to you somehow." He left work that day in a daze, clutching the offer letter, barely feeling the ground beneath his feet. The new position meant steady hours, benefits, and a salary that would finally let him breathe. But more than that, it meant something else, proof that his belief about the world might have been wrong. That kindness wasn't weakness. That compassion didn't disappear into a void. That sometimes, the smallest act could ripple outward in ways you never imagined. In the months that followed, Ethan's life transformed in visible ways. He moved into a better apartment. He paid off debts that had haunted him for years. He slept through the night without panic gripping his chest. But the deeper change happened quietly. He started volunteering once a week at the same shelter he had pointed that man toward, not out of obligation, but out of something new blooming inside him, gratitude. One evening, while serving soup, he saw a young man sitting alone, staring into his cup with hollow eyes. Without thinking, Ethan sat down beside him and asked how his day had been. The man looked up, surprised, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan recognized himself in someone else. Years later, when Ethan stood on a stage speaking at a community fundraiser, he told his story plainly. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't pretend he was a hero. He simply said this: "I thought kindness was expensive. I thought compassion was something only rich people could afford. I was wrong. The truth is, kindness is an investment, and the returns don't always come when or how you expect. But they come." The audience was silent, many wiping away tears. Somewhere in the crowd, a familiar pair of clear eyes met his, and the man with the gloves nodded once, smiling. Ethan smiled back, knowing now, truly knowing, that one small act had not just changed his circumstances. It had changed who he was. Ethan walked outside into the cool night air. The city hummed the way it always had, sirens in the distance, buses exhaling at stops, laughter spilling out of a bar down the block. Yet everything felt different. He felt different. For years, Chicago had felt like a battlefield, every street another test of endurance. Now, it felt like a living thing again, messy, loud, imperfect, but full of people carrying invisible stories just like his. As he walked, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This is Daniel. The gloves saved my hands, but your kindness saved my life. Thank you for telling the truth tonight." Ethan stopped under a streetlight, rereading the words. Daniel. He finally knew the man's name. He typed back slowly, carefully. "You saved mine too. Hope you're doing well." A moment. Later, 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then reappeared. "I am. And I'm trying to pass it on." Ethan smiled, slipped the phone into his pocket, and kept walking. The next few years unfolded not like a miracle montage, but like real life, uneven, unpredictable, and sometimes painfully slow. Ethan's new job challenged him in ways he hadn't expected. Managing logistics wasn't just about numbers and systems, it was about people. Drivers who showed up late because their kids were sick. Warehouse workers pushing themselves too hard because overtime paid the rent. Vendors on the brink of collapse. Old Ethan would have brushed past them, focused only on efficiency. New Ethan listened. He remembered how close he had come to breaking, how invisible he had felt. And he made small choices, flexible schedules, second chances, honest conversations, that rippled outward quietly. Not everyone appreciated it. Some colleagues called him soft. One executive warned him that compassion didn't belong in spreadsheets. Ethan listened politely and kept doing what he believed was right. He had learned something the hard way: success without humanity felt empty. And humanity, when practiced consistently, had a strange way of strengthening success rather than weakening it. One winter morning, nearly 4 years after the night of the gloves, Ethan received an email that made his chest tighten. The shelter he volunteered at was at risk of shutting down. Funding had dried up, donations were down, and the building needed repairs they couldn't afford. Ethan read the email twice, then a third time. Memories flooded back, the steam rising from soup bowls, the tired smiles, the quiet dignity of people trying to survive. He couldn't let it disappear. Not this place. Not the place that symbolized the turning point of his life. That night, Ethan sat at his kitchen table long after the city fell quiet, papers spread around him, coffee growing cold. He wasn't wealthy, not in the way donors usually were, but he was stable. For the first time in his life, he had savings. Enough to be careful with. Enough to protect. And enough to risk. His hand hovered over his laptop keyboard as doubt crept in. What if this ruins me? The old voice whispered. What if kindness takes more than it gives this time? He closed his eyes and thought of his mother's gloves, worn thin but still warm. He thought of Daniel's shaking hands. He thought of the younger version of himself, one bad month away from the street. Then he typed. Ethan didn't just donate. He organized. He called in favors he hated asking for. He spoke at local businesses, pitched to small investors, told his story again and again even when his voice cracked from repetition. He stood in front of rooms where people stared at their phones and rooms where people cried openly. He learned rejection still hurt, but it no longer stopped him. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, momentum built. A retired contractor offered to fix the roof for free. A bakery pledged daily bread. A former shelter resident started a small online campaign that went unexpectedly viral. When the final numbers came in, the shelter didn't just survive, it expanded. Opening day of the renovated shelter arrived with pale sunlight and the smell of fresh paint. Ethan stood near the entrance, hands in his coat pockets, watching people walk in. Some were volunteers. Some were staff. Some were guests, tired, wary, hopeful. Daniel stood beside him, healthier now, his posture straighter, his eyes still clear. "Funny how things circle back," Daniel said softly. Ethan nodded. "I used to think life was random," he replied. "Now I think it listens." Among the guests that day was a teenage boy named Marcus. 17. Quiet. Angry in the way only someone who's been disappointed too many times can be. Ethan noticed him sitting alone, hood pulled low, staring at the floor. Something about him tugged at Ethan's chest. Later, during dinner, Ethan sat across from him and asked simple questions. No pressure. No speeches. Just presence. Marcus barely responded at first. But when Ethan mentioned he used to work 2 jobs just to stay afloat, Marcus's eyes flickered up. "Me too," he muttered. That was all, but it was enough. Weeks turned into months. Ethan kept showing up. Marcus slowly opened up. About his mom's addiction. About sleeping in friends' cars. About feeling like the world had already decided he didn't matter. Ethan didn't offer empty promises. He offered rides. Help with job applications. A listening ear when things fell apart again, as they often did. One evening, Marcus asked, "Why do you do this?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Because someone once helped me when they didn't have to. And it changed everything." Years later, Marcus would walk across a graduation stage, scanning the crowd until he found Ethan's face. Their eyes would meet, and Ethan would feel that same tightness in his throat he'd felt the night he gave away his gloves. The circle widened again. On the 10th anniversary of that winter night, Ethan returned to the street corner where it all began. The city had changed. New buildings. New stores. But the wind still cut the same way. He stood there for a moment, hands tucked into a new pair of gloves, warm, sturdy, replaceable. He thought about how close he had come to walking away. How easy it would have been to say no. He understood now that life didn't hinge on grand gestures or heroic moments. It pivoted on tiny decisions made when no one was watching. As Ethan turned to leave, he noticed a woman struggling with grocery bags nearby, frustration written across her face. Without hesitation, he stepped forward. "Need a hand?" he asked. She looked up, surprised, then smiled with visible relief. "Yeah," she said. "Thank you." As he helped her carry the bags, Ethan felt the familiar warmth spread through his chest, not pride, not expectation, just quiet certainty. Kindness had not made his life perfect. It had made it meaningful. And that, he had learned, was far more powerful.